we'll have to. Okay, I don't know why that's happened. I'll talk to our IT people tomorrow, but as long as it's being recorded, that's fine. All right, I'm going to let people in now because we're at 7 o'clock, so we'll start. Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar. I'm just waiting for one last person who's been left in the waiting room. As you've all left, you've all abandoned this one person from the waiting room who's still waiting to join. There must be a problem with their connection. We'll just give it another minute or two, just in case there are a few more people to turn up, and then I'll kick things off. Okay, I think that person might need to log out and rejoin if anybody's in contact with them. Anyway, just to let you know, we will be recording this evening, so anything you say is being recorded. That recording will be afterwards. I'll post it up on our YouTube channel, so that if you want to go back and see it again, or if you know of anybody who had planned to come along this evening and hasn't managed it, then it will be available for people to go and visit afterwards and see later. Excuse me. If I could ask just a bit of housekeeping. Most of you I see have actually all got your microphones on mute, so that's very good. But while our two presenters this evening are talking, I would ask if you can just keep your microphones on mute so we don't get feedback from things that are going on in your rooms and starting to interfere with other people's listening experiences. If you have a question that occurs to you while the presentations are running, by all means post those in the chat and we will try to deal with them when we move over to the Q&A session. Once the presentations have finished, there will be an opportunity for people to ask questions directly, which you can, as I said, either do directly or you can post in the chat, and our speakers will try to get around to deliver them, and for a more general discussion. If we run out of time, then any questions that are left in the chat at that point, we'll take people's contact details and try to get back to you with more fulsome answers if that's what's needed. The presentation you're going to see tonight will also be made available through our website afterwards. So again, you'll have the opportunity to go back and revisit, or to query some of the information further, or to pick up some of the contact details that I know will be presented there. We've got two speakers tonight. We've got Andrew Hollis and Ed Parnaby. I won't go too much into their backgrounds because I'm sure they'll want to introduce themselves, and they can do that far better than I possibly can, other than to say they both work for the Norfolk County Council, and they're going to be talking to you this evening about local cycling and walking infrastructure plans and ways that you can help and contribute in the development of those plans and the development of those schemes. So at this point, I will hand over to Ed and Andrew, and I think it's Ed who's going to be talking to us first. So Ed, if you can start sharing your screen now so that everyone can see that, and we'll start.
Thank you, Pete. I think Andrew is going to be sharing the presentation.
Okay, so Andrew, if you can share your screen then, please.
Just loading. Brilliant. Thank you, Pete. And thanks everyone for joining us. Yeah, just a quick intro. So my name's Ed. I'm the active travel team leader, and we're both in the active travel team, which sits within the Norfolk County Council Environment Service. So you may be familiar with that area of the council. We have been working on this plan for some time, and basically today, if we skip on to the next slide, the purpose of today is basically to share an overview of this walking and cycling infrastructure plan. The technical name for this is the Local Cycling Walking Infrastructure Plan, or LCWIP. We might refer to it as the plan this evening because it's quite a lengthy acronym, but it is pretty much what it sounds like. It is in essence a walking and cycling action plan for the network across the county. So yeah, we've been tasked with doing this for Norfolk. And as you'll see on this screen, it just quickly shows as well, there are already, the County Council's already worked with the partners shown there to develop these similar plans for Kings Lynn, Great Yarmouth and Greater Norwich. Those are already on our website, and they've already been drawing some funding because of those schemes. And we'll come to what we plan at the end in the next steps about integrating some of this work together, because it's if you like, it's grown up slightly separately, and we'll be drawing some of this work together later in the year. So we could go to the next slide, please. So there's three purposes of so the purpose of the day we talked about. This is the purpose of the document itself. What is the purpose of a county-wide LCWIP? Why do we need one? So it's in essence to prioritise schemes over the short, medium and long term. There's a lot of schemes you could potentially do. There's always going to be limited resource, and some of these may be more important to people than others. So it sounds very sort of crude and sort of top level, but it is very important for us to be able to understand what are the short, medium and long term infrastructure priorities, and one of the key outcomes will be to list the schemes on that basis following this piece of work. And perhaps number two is really key. Number two there is about submitting for funding. So nearly all the opportunities to fund schemes from the Department for Transport and Active Travel England. So for those who don't know, Active Travel England is the relatively new executive body within the Department for Transport, and it's now a statutory planning consultee on any development over 150 homes. They are funding active travel projects and infrastructure through highways authorities like ourselves, and understanding what the right schemes are to fund is key to that. And they will be looking to fund schemes potentially from our published LCWIP, these plans, going forward. So it's really key that we cover as much of Norfolk as we can, so that we're not just getting schemes funded where we've already got these published in Kings Lynn, Yarmouth and Norwich. And then number three, I think this is perhaps a sort of zooming out bigger picture. This is basically, it's in order, what's it in order to do, where you're trying to get to? Well, we're trying to get to support the government's ambition of 50% of all journeys in towns and cities to be walked or cycled by 2030. So there's quite an ambitious target, and obviously we understand the level of that ambition, and as a council we're trying to work towards achieving that. We know that that could be in some towns in the area, that's probably more likely to be achieved through increase to walking. But fundamentally, you need a network that will enable people to do that. So yeah, that's the purpose. I think we go to the next slide, please. So this is basically why should you improve the network? Why do these things? Is it, just to get walking and cycling? What are the outcomes you're going to get from doing so? I won't go into all of these. It's pretty well documented, but we've got lots of good national, international, national and local evidence for these. I think most of it probably sits at the national level, drawing on the government's gear change document, which published in 2020. But it's also backs up things like air quality and local plans that intend to do these things. We want to increase the level of active travel because it will achieve an improvement to quality of life, the environment, and enhance the local economy. So that's that in a nutshell. And on this slide here is basically how we're going to do it. So these items here are basically descriptions of what a good network should be. In essence, I'll just give you an idea. These look like a load of sort of quite sensible words, but what do they really mean? So direct, it sounds really obvious. Well, why wouldn't you want a route to be direct? But it's quite key. A lot of historic routes for cycling have often made detours because they've gone on to simple, quieter routes. Sometimes that's the right solution, but you do need to try and make routes direct. Doesn't necessarily mean the most direct route, but certainly direct rather than on detours. Comfortable, I mean, what does comfortable mean? And I think really here we're looking at things like the surface. Is it something that someone can comfortably ride or wheel on? If you've got smaller wheels or you're in a wheelchair, you might be more susceptible to feeling those bumps. Or if you're riding on a bike and you're traveling and you want to keep people cycling on a good quality route, it needs to be nice and even so the bumps just don't become a rumble strip. And of course, this leads into the other related point. How is the scheme built? Will it last? and is it well maintained? You know, is it clean and well maintained? Sort of related, not directly in the scope of the LCWIP that we're talking about, but important points all the same. Coherent. So coherent is it easy to follow? You know, we've probably all been on a route and got lost. I'm sure there's no one in the room who hasn't had that, but it probably happens more than it should do on some of the walking and cycling network. And we know that the main solution to this it's not just good signage, but it's mainly about having good signage, but it's also about whether the route is logical and easy to follow. It doesn't take, you know, it's not something that's hidden out of the way or behind a barrier. And safe, this one's probably fairly self-explanatory, but what we're really looking at here is the route adequately separated from traffic? If you've got very low traffic volumes or very low speed traffic, or and both of those, then you may not need any level of real separation. But by and large, the new guidance that is covered on this slide, the local transport note that came out in 2020, makes it pretty clear that all schemes, you know, where you've got higher flow traffic like 30 miles an hour, and you've got you know, a reasonable number of vehicles on a road, your typical A, B, or C road, that you should be looking to separate cycling, and you should be looking to separate cycling from walking, because they're all a differential speed, and that's definitely something we're looking at and want to make these schemes achieve. And that, you know, I think it presents a challenge to some of the networks that we'll look at today. And then the course attractive, which sounds really subjective, and it is. There's some subjectivity to all of these, but I think the key thing here is that you've got appealing routes that end up being well-used routes, and you could describe that as, you know, I think one of the sort of phrases people use there is it's things to see and do. You know, that might be a route along a nice landscape, or it might be a route along lots of amenities or places to sit, stop and sit. You know, a welcoming place. It's lots of different things to different people, but it needs to try and achieve that. So a little bit of a walk through those, but that's partly why you're going to see some of the routes that you've got, because sometimes you might think, why that route? And we've tried to apply partly these criteria being part of the assessment. So thanks, Andrew. If we go to the next slide as well. So slightly drier topic might be the policy, but there's lots of good policy out there that does really in more ways than not align. So we've looked at, without reading through all of these, we have looked at planning policy, transport plans, environmental and public health policies, and it's probably not much surprise to anyone who's familiar with some or all of these that they are pointing in the direction of what we're talking about here: increasing walking and cycling, trying to get more people traveling this way, making it easier and safer to do, and those criteria we looked at on the last slide. Ultimately, it's good to have a framework of this consistent approach, but what this action plan does is it's hopefully a stage beyond strategy that shows an implementation plan. It's in essence what it is. So yeah, I'll just move on to the next slide as well. So we followed a number of stages to get where we are. It's not, the LCWIP is not just a plan, but it was actually a process set out by the Department for Transport. And we hope that following this process will give us a robust plan, a robust LCWIP. And the stage we're at, as you can probably see highlighted in red, is stage 5, and we are just starting a 8-week period. Well, we're a week and a half into an 8-week public engagement, and we're running that until the 13th of July. And in that, we'll hopefully, what this main stage is to do is you see it's labelled prioritising improvements. It's about getting feedback on prioritising the improvements in the network that we are sharing in that engagement. And the primary way that we'll do that is through a survey. I won't go into the engagement now because I'll actually hand over to my colleague Andrew, and he's going to provide an overview of the LCWIP content that's actually in that engagement, and how that engagement works, and how to feedback. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ed. Hi, everybody. My name's Andrew. I'm a project officer at the Norfolk County Council. I've been working on the county-wide plan for quite some time now. As Ed alluded to, I just wanted to, over the next few slides, just to provide some content and detail of what is actually within the county-wide local cycling walking infrastructure plan. So what does the plan cover? And then I'll come on to talk about how people can engage and provide feedback on the proposals within the plan. So the slide that we're looking at the moment represents the study area for the county-wide local cycling infrastructure plan. So as Ed alluded to earlier, plans have already been created for Kings Lynn, Norwich and Great Yarmouth. What Norfolk County Council is doing as a next step is to grow that plan to cover the rest of Norfolk with a focus on 20 areas for detailed active travel network planning, so towns and across the county. The plan also covers, and I'll come into more detail on this later, details about how we can improve connectivity between towns and connect people in rural communities with kind of central services in urban areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. So the first place I'd like to talk about, well, the first level of the plan I'd like to talk about is around the potential active travel networks within those 20 areas that are highlighted on the map. Now, I've picked an example to share today. Or actually, I've jumped ahead of a slide, so bear with me. I've talked too fast and I've gone over the slide that I should have talked about, so apologies. So within the plan, I shall repeat myself, bear with me. Within the plan, there are active travel network proposals for 20 towns across Norfolk, one of which is ACLE, which is in this presentation as an example that we'll talk about today. There are proposals for improvements to improve the trails network and the national cycle network within the plan, as well as potential new routes to improve those existing networks. The plan also includes network support projects which help people use those networks. So they could be such things as signage or wayfinding, secure cycle parking, or your standard cycle parking. So I'll move on to the next slide. So I've included ACLE as an example as an indicative active travel network, which is included within the county-wide LCWIP. This is representative of the other 19 areas highlighted within the LCWIP. So what we're looking at here is an indicative active travel network for ACLE. How this has been identified is that the team has conducted a review of local plans, neighbourhood plans and policies. There's been a review of data, which includes kind of cycling propensity data, accident data, traffic data. There's also been site visits to audit these potential active travel network routes. We've also overlaid that information with data from our district and borough partners. So we've shown on this map, you can see where people currently live at the moment and where people might live or work in the future, which are those kind of hatched blue, purple and red areas on the map. So the principle of the network is that it actually connects people where people live now or in the future with central services in the town centre. It connects with schools, green space, leisure and health areas. So this is the active travel network for ACLE. As you can see, there is it also links with the public transport services in the south. I'm not going to talk through each individual route in detail, but effectively what we're asking for people to, as part of our engagement survey, which is currently live until the 13th of July, is to provide feedback on their views of the potential network in a town that they might be interested in, which is covered within 20 that we've covered within the plan, and to let us know whether they agree or disagree with the network. Let us know if there's any particular route that they feel we should prioritise. So let us know if there's any routes that they feel might need some improvement or any tweaks to that matter. You'll also notice within the town was what is termed as a walking zone. Each of the towns has an area that's kind of highlighted, and within this area, the focus for any schemes would be to help improve priority for people who are walking or using a mobility aid or a wheelchair. And those schemes are about looking, or the focus for those schemes is around looking at things which enable people to walk, or to use the technical jargon, wheel within that area. And that is an anticipated area of kind of high footfall. So such schemes might be looking at the conditions of pavements, both in pavement width and pavement condition. It might be looking at to improve the quality and frequency of crossing points within that area. It may be, it could be, how do we make people feel safer? So could that involve slowing traffic speeds to some extent? So within the actual survey, what we're asking people is to their feedback on whether people feel that walking zone is actually the right area for Norfolk County Council to focus schemes on improving those conditions for people that are travelling by foot. And if need be, we can expand and tweak that area if people feel that it's if it needs adjustment. One thing I'd like to just kind of point out, when the phrase walking zone is one that is a kind of industry-wide phrase. I'm keen to highlight that it doesn't mean that any cars will be excluded. It's not about pedestrianisation. It's about improving conditions for walking and just improving the priority for walkers within that area. One part of the survey will ask people how much they support potential network support schemes. So there are 6 of these within the survey, which we'd like to get feedback from stakeholders and the public. The first one is public cycle hire schemes. An example of this is the Beryl scheme, which is currently live in Norwich, and there's a scheme called Ginger in Great Yarmouth. Would like to know people's opinions about route wayfinding or signage. Do people think that needs to be improved within their particular area? Would like feedback on cycle parking. Also like feedback on e-cargo bikes, which is like the Zedify example that the gentleman is holding in the right-hand side of this slide. I'd also like feedback on travel hubs, which are kind of a central point where people can connect between multiple different points of transport. So, for example, in this image we have here is, travel hub will contain some connectivity between walking, cycling, and potentially passenger transport, and there will be information services available to enable people to use sustainable modes of transport more. And that potentially, so those are the kind of the network support schemes that we're asking people to feedback on. So those are within the kind of the 20 towns within Norfolk. If we were to zoom out and look at Norfolk as a whole, there are kind of 2 existing networks within Norfolk. The first one, which people will be familiar with, no doubt, is the Norfolk Trails Network. We have at Norfolk County Council, there are a team of trails officers that maintain this network of walking trails. Some of these trails you can actually cycle on. An example of that is the Marriott's Way. And some you can actually ride, not only cycle and walk, but you can actually ride horses on as well. I know one of those is Marriott's, and parts of the Pellets Way you can do that. A number of schemes have been identified to improve the condition of the Norfolk Trails network. They range from improving the condition of the actual path, both in width and the quality of the surface, improving drainage, potential schemes to improve crossing points over busy kind of A-road junctions. And some larger schemes also include kind of the replenishment or replacement or improvement of boardwalks. There's a couple of examples which are on the Norfolk coast. The second existing network in Norfolk is the National Cycle Network, which it's overseen by the charity which you may have heard of called Sustrans, who are the custodians of the National Cycle Network. Norfolk County Council has been working with Sustrans to help improve the existing cycle network within Norfolk. So improvements to the network within Norfolk could include removing barriers, conducting traffic surveys to see if parts of the network are suitable for cycling, surface improvements, route realignments where parts of the network go along very busy main roads, and improving crossings or crossing points at busy junctions. And what we're asking people to do for both of these networks is to, in the survey, we need to try and prioritise where the council needs to prioritise where to focus its efforts on improving this network. So the survey will help us do that by seeing where do people believe it's a good idea to improve the existing networks within Norfolk, and also which of these trails or sections of the National Cycle Route should we start looking at first to help kind of build a prioritised plan. The final layer of improving connectivity within Norfolk is a very busy map of potential new routes within Norfolk that enhance the existing network for cycling and walking. So this is a very busy map, and I apologise for the detail on such a small screen. The information is available within the survey, and there is online content. What these red routes represent is potential new routes which build and improve the existing cycling and walking networks within Norfolk. I'll just draw on an example. The orange line on this map represents the existing National Cycle Network. Some people on the call will be familiar that the National Cycle Network used to have further reach into kind of northeast Norfolk, So some of these routes will look to potentially improve that network and improve the connectivity between towns and link people in rural communities with central services. I would hasten to add that a lot of these are probably potentially longer term projects. There is no funding for any of these proposals within this presentation, but these are potential routes that we'd like to get feedback from stakeholders and the public to understand where is the demand for these routes, and where should Norfolk County Council prioritise should funding become available. This next slide just zooms in a little bit because this area is quite busy. So there's a second slide here which shows the potential wider connectivity routes that connect Greater Norwich and Durham with local towns and smaller villages in and around Greater Norwich and Durham. So that was the kind of the content within the survey. So our approach for the engagement on the county-wide local cycle and walking infrastructure plan is that there is an online survey which is open from the 18th of May to the 13th of July. So it's an 8-week period that engagement is open for. It's hosted on Norfolk County Council website, and to support the survey, a series of, which is a new thing, an additional thing that we wanted to do for the county-wide plan, is to hold a limited number of public information events which have been held over the past week or so in 7 locations across Norfolk, and there will be for those people that go to the Norfolk show on the 28th and 29th, then that content will also be on display at the Royal Norfolk shows. The purpose of those events really is to just help and reach an audience that we may not necessarily be able to reach via online means, so those events, I think the team are actually in Wroxham and Houghton tomorrow at the library from 12:30. I'll just plug that event whilst we're here. We've also shared some information with kind of our stakeholders as well, which I just thought I'd mention. So the team has briefed borough and district councils that we've been working with. Our county councillors have been briefed. I know Peter issued a briefing as part of the invitation to the seminar, so thank you for doing that, Peter. We are in the process of contacting quite a wide-ranging list of stakeholders to drive awareness of the county-wide plan. And the council does have an email database. I don't know the latest number of people who have signed up to that, but I'm sure it's over 1,000 people are part of the Norfolk residents panel. Don't quote me on that number, it might be a lot more than that. So we'll be trying to reach as many people as possible and engage with a broad spectrum of people to ensure that they have the opportunity to feedback on the plan. I won't hover on this slide too much because I've pretty much covered that. So there's a timeline. The survey closes on the 13th of July. So as I mentioned, the surveys for the countywide local cycle and walking infrastructure plan are hosted on Citizen Space, which is the engagement portal for the Norfolk County Council, and people can access the survey by visiting norfolk.gov.uk active travel. That will be a live link in the presentation when I send that over, Pete. If any bodies wanted to, any town councils wanted to pull together a combined response, then you could do that and email that through to haveyourSay@norfolk.gov.uk. The images that you can see on this screen kind of give you a flavour of what the online survey looks like. So over on this side, people can choose, and I apologise, it's actually come out quite small. People can choose which of the towns that they would like to review and comment on. There is, so if I clicked on ACORL, the survey would show me a map of the ACORL indicative active travel network. I could click on the different routes, and that would show me more information about that potential route, how long it is, and what it connects. People can interact with the key to switch on and off kind of future allocations, trails network, so the Weavers Way would pop up or down on the east side. And people can review the map, and then there's a short series of questions to help us understand how people feel about the proposed network. Within that list, there is also the opportunity to provide feedback on the Norfolk Trails, National Cycle Network and strategic routes. There is quite a lot within that survey, but people don't have to complete all of it. You can choose which network that you would like to comment on. You can comment on all three, but if you just wanted to comment on the National Cycle Network and the additional route, you could opt to just do that. And so in summary, if you'd like, I think what we're asking people primarily to do is to help us quantify the feedback by feeding back through these surveys. However, if town council, for example, wanted to pull together a combined response, then that can be emailed through to haveyourSay@norfolk.gov.uk. If you do when you go through to norfolk.gov.uk active travel, you will find there will be on the website a mini guide for each of the towns. If you click on the town, that gives an overview of the it's a PDF that gives an overview of the proposed indicative network. And then there is also a copy of the full plan should you want to access that. That's quite a weighty tome in electronic format. It's probably about 120 pages. Hence we've produced some mini guides. So that's an overview. I'll now hand you back to Ed. We'll just kind of wrap up.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so on this slide, I won't look at the left side. That's mostly what's been covered in good detail there by Andrew. And I'm just looking on the right-hand side about basically what happens next. So as you heard, the engagement will run until mid-July. And then we've got a bit more work to do. So at that stage, we need to complete the analysis of all the feedback we've had. Some of that, by and large, as Andrew's later, we are getting every response to go through the survey. It's only where you want to give a detailed local response from an area, from a parish or town, where we're encouraging to use the Have Your Say. We'll still need to bring all that together. The survey, as you might have alluded to, is designed so that it gives really good quantitative feedback, but with still some option to give comments in there as well. We've often sort of tried to get the right balance with these things. If you give too much qualitative feedback, you make it very hard to bring that together at the end in the engagement. If there's lots and lots of comment and not a lot of things that can be compared and quantified. So we're hopefully going to have a really, we'll start that analysis during the engagement and we'll start looking at what we're getting in, but we won't be able to really get to grips with that until after 18th of July. 13th of July. So we've got a bit of time, and we're targeting to take finalised plans that will be shaped upon that feedback, and take that to Cabinet around September. So that's not set in stone yet. So we're working as best we can to achieve that. And then when we've got past that point and we've got an adopted plan, we'll be asking Cabinet to adopt the plan. From there, we can look to utilise that plan to get funding opportunities. And it's probably also worth saying, I haven't allayed to it yet, but it's something that's probably a few of you are aware of, is that Active Travel England asked us as Norfolk County Council to self-assess last year our active travel delivery. They then moderated a score against other local authorities, and then funding for that year was based upon that score. What we understand is it's going to be a similar process, and one of those scores, as you might expect, was the progress on this LCWIP. So we want to be in a good position to maximise funding in a county, and this is one of the ways of doing that. So yeah, that's pretty much the sort of the next part of this, and I think hopefully that's a good summary of the how we've got here, what the content is, and what the engagement is, and the next steps. And then I think I hand back over to Pete, and we can take some questions.
Right, excellent. A lot of information there, both spoken and graphic, and a lot, I think, for people to take in. I suppose the big point that I'm taking from what you've been saying tonight is to go to that website, is to have a look at the survey, look at the information that's specific to your area or that you're particularly interested in, and make your comments. So I'll throw the floor open now to our guests this evening, and has anybody got any immediate questions they want to ask, or to get things rolling? What I'll do is, because Ralph posted a question in the chat while you were actually speaking earlier, which I think you perhaps partially answered, but his question was, is the priority safety? If so, why not concentrate on separating pedestrians and cyclists in dangerous places like the A149 between Sheringham and Cromer? I don't know if you'd like to add anything else to that.
I think I'd say that, just to sort of frame that generally, is that that's exactly the type of feedback we're looking for, but through the survey. The reason being is that today is not the best forum to collate that, but to understand what people's priorities are in these areas and around Norfolk the county, basically, and in your local area. And if that comes up as something that we should be doing, then again, that's going to lead it towards it being a priority. I should say that is, without going into the detail of each local area this evening, just to allay to the fact that the A149 is covered in the Sheringham and Cromer routes, and obviously that's for want of a better phrase, within those urban areas. On that map that Andrew shared, where there's wider connectivity, we do look at that longer east-west movement, and it's suffice to say, longer east-west movements away from urban areas are more difficult to achieve, but equally we want to find out whether people think those are important. So that's part of what this engagement's for, to understand whether we should be, what the next steps are, which of these schemes and routes should we be looking to develop further and potentially seek funding for.
Well, I think you can take as a subtext from Ralph's question that he clearly thinks that that is a priority, at the very least along that A149 rate. Peter, you've got your hand up. Would you like to switch your mic on and ask your question?
Yes, if I could, just in relation particularly to cycling, will there be any consideration of support facilities like cycle parking, cycle racks, cycle friendly businesses, and that sort of thing? Can that be included in the survey and in what may be delivered?
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, we've put those in the survey under the category, I think, of supporting measures. I think that's correct. I might have got the wrong phrase there, but it is in the survey, and it looks at things like cycle hire and cycle parking. I think we separated out cycle parking and secure cycle parking because they're slightly, Andrew's nodding, because we did deliberate as to they're not the same thing. Not everybody wants secure cycle parking. They might actually be more happy on many people are quite happy using well-located, well-constructed, simple stands. They're probably the right thing for trips to a shop during the daytime, Leaving your bike overnight at a rail station might be for 2 days is a different endeavour, and you might want some different facilities. So we want, in this piece of engagement, we just want to find out what's important to people. Are lots of people in one area saying you really should improve the cycle parking? And like you've suggested, Peter, I mean, we've done site audits and we've noticed that it isn't the level that you might want it to be in most areas. I mean, I don't think it's a bit of a broad statement, but we've looked in some areas and there's been almost no cycle parking in some of the areas, not to do sort of any naming or shaming. And I'm sure that's, you know, there's been valid reasons why things might have been removed, but ultimately it needs someone to look at it and work out how to sensibly increase that provision in the right places. And yeah, that's within the scope of this engagement. But I would still say it's at the general level. It's not how many spaces are we going to put where. It's more a case of, are people calling for more of it? Do they want secure provision, or would plain standard provision be what people need?
Okay, Peter, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just following from my colleague Peter from Hovton. Obviously, we work closely together with Hovton wherever we can. We just happen to have a river between the two of us, which doesn't really help matters. How much notice do you take of the neighbourhood plans that have been put together over the years?
So I'm just trying to unmute myself. We try to review all literature. I mean, I don't know, Andrew, if you'll be better placed to take that than myself. Do you think that we can comment on the level of individual plans?
Off the top of my head, we have there has been a review of neighbourhood plans, and that has been a consideration within the development of the active travel networks for each of the 20 towns. I think the networks within the 20 towns are kind of provide direct connectivity between locations. If there is, this part of the engagement is, if you feel that there is part of a particular neighbourhood plan that you feel hasn't been covered, or you wanted to raise, then this is part of the engagement, and we can go, if that was something that you wanted to bring up, Peter, then that's it's not. Yeah. That's fine.
Obviously we've got the presentation in Wroxham tomorrow, Wroxham Library tomorrow. Yes. Which I don't know whether you two gentlemen will be there, but obviously it gives us an opportunity to express what we did with our neighbourhood plan. Yeah. But we put together several years ago what we called the Green Loop. Now, obviously, as you know, Wroxham and Hovton suffer from this road called the 1151. Yeah. And we do a traffic monitoring every day, as do Hovton, but we count somewhere in the region of 5 million vehicles go along that road. Yes. Now, if we're looking at trying to cater for cycling and also for foot traffic, we know we've got a problem. Yes. And one of the things we put in our neighbourhood plan was, as I said, a green loop. But it's then trying to get the local farmer, the big estate owner in and around Wroxham, involved. And at the moment, he's very negative to the view.
Okay. So that I think that's sad to hear that's the case. My colleagues Richard and David will be in Wroxham and Hobbiton, and I know Richard was part of the team that actually conducted the work and the audit in Wroxham and Hobbiton. So we'll really welcome your views, and we can take another look at that and see what can be done to try and help the situation in Wroxham and Hobbiton with the connectivity.
Yeah, I mean that's good, because we're actually Peter and Russell from Hovton. We're meeting tomorrow after the event as well, so it gives us the chance to catch up between us.
Yeah. I know Richard is aware of the Green Loop, so I feel as I'm dropping Richard in it, but he will be more than happy to chat that through with you. He's part of the team that's pulled these plans together.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, Paul, you've got your hand up.
Yes, like more for you. Yeah, I'm from Western Norfolk Parish Council, but also the Pathmakers charity in Norfolk here for walking and access to the countryside. And I'm sort of think we're a bit in danger of overdoing it on the surveys here, because on the Norfolk County Council website, there's a chance to shape walking and cycling and horse riding routes in Norfolk survey. And we've got the survey you're talking about as well, both of which in the summary mention the LCWIP. And there's also a green spaces survey going on by Greater Norwich. So I'm a bit confused and concerned at the amount of consultation that's going on and how it all comes together. And I wonder if you can comment on that.
Thanks, Paul. We can certainly feed that back to our comms team. We're not the only sort of parties to getting this, if you will, the engagement slot in the calendar. And there's been some challenges to getting, as you can probably imagine, with other things that have been consulted upon at the county council, just to get the 8-week availability and with the pre-election period. So there were a number of factors. I wasn't aware of the city council's engagement, but I'm sure our comms communications people are. I just want to pick up on the walking and cycling. Perhaps Andrew and I can take that away and come back. But I wasn't aware of a separate engagement. I don't know whether that's something on our website that we need to make sure has got consistent, accurate information. If you go onto the active travel page, it will take you purely to the LCWIP survey, which, as Andrew alluded to, does cover Acle through to Windham, covers the alphabetical list with the wider trails. But I'll have a look at that, and I think it's fundamentally for us to pick up with our communications people, because Andrew and I don't have a great deal of sort of day-to-day work in the other areas outside of walking and cycling. We try to be aware of what certainly related areas, but and what's going on. But we can pick that up and we can find out the answer.
Okay, well, I mean, just if I can come back, I was familiar with the one you're talking about, your survey, and I was looking at the website earlier and saw this chance to shape walking, cycling and horse riding routes in Norfolk. So, and they both opened on the same date as well. So, potential confusion there, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that, Paul. I'll take a look at that first thing in the morning with the communications team. If there is a problem, we'll get it sorted immediately.
I think there's a general issue there about ensuring that when you're engaging with people that it is done in a way that's as user friendly as possible, and it's clear to people exactly where they go to make their points known. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff that you are consulting on. You can understand why somebody might want to chunk it up, but I think it needs to be as user friendly as possible. And if I can put a slight prod in here as well, and we like to hear the other end of exactly what's come out of it and get some feedback on what were the conclusions of those types of engagement. Right, Birgit, you had your hand up earlier, and I noticed you posted a question in the chat. Would you like to pose that question, or would you want me to do it?
I'll pose it. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I would like to second what Paul just said as well. I filled in surveys. I'm totally confused about which ones I've already filled in. The information that I gave probably isn't very useful, because, Anyway, the point I would like to make, the question I would like to ask is, I live in Fulsham, which is not connected to the Reefham plan or the Fakenham plan or the Dereham plan. What are your plans for villages like mine?
Thank you. As at this stage, we've tried to deliver quite a large scale county-wide LCWIP, which we're calling it, but as you rightfully say, it doesn't cover all of the areas within the county. I think realistically, we have to come back to, or we have to publish what we're working on, I think, because I think if we tried to do this across all the areas, we simply wouldn't have published any county-wide LCWIP until sometime, probably, I'd say at least another year, to gather all the wide information. That's probably a vast underestimate, I would say. We've probably found the scope of this piece has already crept beyond what was easily manageable. It's a bit of an understatement, with things like the cycle network and the wider connectivity. I would hope that a lot of the wider connectivity picks up opportunity for those connections. I'm not going to say across the whole of the board, but I'll pick on Windham as an example. Wyndham's obviously not a small town, it's a reasonably sized town with some growth, but near there is places like Hethel, and that's one of the wider connectivity schemes for a number of I think quite tangible reasons, but we want to see what people's views are on that. If there isn't a wider connectivity or schemes that connect to where you live, then I think that can be fed back through the engagement, which is probably the best place to do that is probably through the wider connectivity survey. I think there's a more general point, which is when do we visit smaller towns and conurbations? And I think I can't give you a deadline on that, because I think ultimately that would need to be post-publishing this report and then subject to getting funding, because we did actually, we talk about getting funding, don't we? The LCWIP is something that was funded itself by Active Travel England, by revenue funding from the Department of Transport ultimately. So to do further work on that, we would seek further funding. And then of course there's the inverted commas capital funding, which is what you would then bid on to deliver the scheme, to build them, which is the sort of two sides of this. So I think that's something we can look at. It's definitely outside the scope of this, of going into a detailed new level of, let's say, the other remaining urban areas, for want of a better description, conurbations. But I hope that if you pick it up in the wider connectivity, that we can at least see where those, let's say, patterns are and where the strength of that feedback is, and we can see that we really should have included X, Y, or Z, and that'll be something that we can incorporate into those prioritisation of plans.
Yeah, because what strikes me particularly about my village is that a lot of children go to school in Reefham, and there's no way that they can cycle safely to Reefham at the moment, and it would be really easy to change that situation. And so in that regard, I was wondering whether you work with Slowways in any way, because they are working on that sort of thing, aren't they?
I'm not familiar with Slowways, I have to confess.
Okay.
I circulated some stuff on Slowways, so I'll forward a link onto you outside this meeting. But yeah, they're doing some stuff on encouraging cycling and certainly long range cycling and walking networks. It's a charity.
And just on that note as well, we are, we've got national. I think Andrew allayed to the guidance, this local transport note that came out in 2020, which sets design guidance. We talked about the segregation from higher flow traffic. What there isn't yet is rural design guidance for want of a better word, for non-urban areas. And of course, much of the county is rural, and some of the connectivity in between the areas we've talked about is rural. Active Travel England have allayed to the fact that that guidance will come out. I think it was due technically the end of last year. And the County Council did a bit of work with Sustrans to try and understand how you might improve rural networks. But there's a lot more to do on that. And I think we'll get some, I'm optimistic we'll get some national guidance that we'll talk a bit more about things like quiet lanes and rural speeds and things like that. But at the moment, we don't have that guidance. So some of that connectivity is subject to finding out a bit more clearer, better national guidance that we can apply locally.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Paul, I'm assuming your hand is still up from last time round. Right, Preston, I'll come to you in a minute because James has posted a question in the chat which he's struggling to get his hand up, so I'll pose it for you. So James has asked whether the active travel network is a prelude to 15-minute zones.
I think I can answer that. They're quite separate things. There's no provision of 15-minute or 20-minute neighbours, different descriptions within the local cycling walking infrastructure plan. It's the constituent elements, the content, as it were, that Andrew ran through, but that is primarily routes, walking and cycling routes within the urban areas, as I've keep referring to the towns and villages that we've talked about, and it is the wider connectivity. And I think there's a sort of separate piece that the County Council has talked about on 20-minute neighbourhoods, but that's not something that we're engaging with in this area. And I think there's some information on the Norfolk County Council website on that, just more generally, as well as I think on Active Norfolk have some good information on that. But it's not something within the it's not a constituent part of setting up a walking and cycling infrastructure plan.
Okay, thanks for that. Preston, I cut you off. I apologise for that, but it's your chance now.
I remember sitting here in this room about a year ago talking about the non-motorised transport part of the Longstratton bypass. And at the time, we agreed, and I think it was yourself, agreed that Taysborough being ignored inside the 5 kilometre routes of the Longstrand bypass. I think it was yourselves were at that meeting. We're chairing it. And I just wondered if any thought had ever been given to the comments we passed on to you, and that actually there should have been a cycleway developed coming north as part of the Longstrand bypass project.
The reason I'm hesitating with my response is I may be incorrect, but I don't recall that.
Certainly, I did a written response to you in depth.
Okay.
And my parish council chairman sitting there going, "Yep, I signed up for that one as well."
Okay.
Can I just ask, Preston, was that to the Longstratton bypass team?
It was, and I thought you had chaired the meeting.
No, it wouldn't have been myself or Andrew, but we can feed that back.
Please, because it looks like it's been totally ignored again.
What we are trying to tie a few things together here. What we're trying to do with the LCWIP in Longstratton is make sure that the routes that are identified align with not only what's there, but what is being developed along with the bypass. I'm almost certain it wasn't to myself, and it probably wasn't to Andrew in my team. But I would say if you could feed that back to us through the Have Your Say, and I think we will then pass that to Longstratton bypass team to give you a response, because I think we probably need to sit down with them, as we have done with trying to get the routes to be in the inverted commas right places. But I think they, like with any large development like that, there's obviously risk and opportunity in making sure you actually get these things to lead where they should do.
I think the county councillor in charge was definitely being very rude about Longstratton bypass.
Okay.
Time there. Okay, I've had my say. My parish councillor is nodding in the corner. I can go home now.
job done for this evening.
That's it. Yeah, I can be on the council for another 4 years now.
Yeah, I think one of the issues here is that, of course, what this is exposing is that split between strategic sort of travel planning at the county level, and the fact that planning decisions on quite big infrastructure issues, is taken at the district level. That's why it's really important to make sure that the different organisations are talking to each other. Otherwise, things that are of concern to local residents and communities, can fall between the cracks. And actually, things like bypass development is actually an opportunity to piggyback measures that would actually make a significant difference to local communities.
Yep. Okay.
Right. Has anybody else got any questions they'd like to ask? If not, I've got one quick one, which is something that occurred to me as we were speaking. Is how do you think the proposals for devolution, the devolution proposals at county level, might affect funding opportunities to actually implement some of the things that might come out of this survey?
I think that's probably beyond mine and Andrew's knowledge of that process at the moment, and indeed what's been sort of agreed. But I think it definitely presents an opportunity. I mean, we talked in the LCWIP about potential funding, and of course they're quite broad. It's not all Department of Transport and Active Travel England that sits within it. We've obviously had some funding around the county from the Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities. Get my the current title correct for that department, and that's some of that's come through funding such as the Towns Fund and I'm going to call it the Levelling Up Fund. I think those are both correct. And of course we've also sought some funding from DEFRA, which is funding e-cargo bike project rather than infrastructure in the Norwich area, and if that works well, it might be something we can do elsewhere, but that was targeted in the air quality management area. I think there's obviously potential for other ways to fund it, and I think we need to have a broad interest in seeking those sources of funding. But as to whether we get more from that devolution, I think we'll have to wait and see, because I certainly haven't got any information on that at the moment, but I'm optimistic that might be the case. Okay, well, fingers crossed. Right, last chance. I don't see any hands up either in reality or virtually. Has anybody got any burning questions or observations they would like to make? If not, I would just like to say thank you to Ed and to Andrew for speaking to us tonight. I would like to urge everybody here to visit the website and contact Ed and Andrew and their team through the email address that it was part of the
the presentation that we saw earlier. That presentation and some further information will be posted on our website, so you'll be able to get to that quickly, and that will include active links. So an active link that will take you directly to the website, and that will automatically fill in an email for you to go directly to the Have Your Say mailbox, so you can contact, either make observations or ask for help or questions. Just finally to say thank you to you all for turning up tonight and giving up your time this evening. It's very much appreciated by me, and I'm sure by Ed and Andrew. And just to say, I will be following up with a survey to you after this meeting's concluded, just to get some feedback from you on how it went. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, everyone.